The disappearance of Emily Carter began on a cold Thursday afternoon in late November. She was 17, a high school senior, known for being punctual, organized, and predictable. That was what made her disappearance so unsettling, because Emily Carter never just vanished. At 2:45 p.m., the final school bell rang at Brookside High. Students poured into the parking lot, laughter echoing across the campus as cars started and engines roared to life. Emily was seen walking toward her gray sedan, keys already in her hand. Multiple witnesses confirmed it. She got into her car. She drove away. And that was the last confirmed sighting of her alive. By 6:30 p.m., her parents called the police. Emily hadn't come home. Her phone was going straight to voicemail. And her car was missing. Detective Laura Bennett was assigned to the case that same night. At first, it seemed straightforward. A missing teenager. Possibly a runaway. But within hours, that theory collapsed. Emily's bank account showed no activity. Her phone hadn't been used. And most importantly, she had left everything behind. Her wallet. Her overnight bag. Even her charger. People don't run away like that, Bennett said quietly. They plan. By midnight, the case had shifted from missing person to something far more serious. The next morning, Emily's car was found. Abandoned in a quiet parking lot behind a grocery store just 3 miles from the school. The location raised immediate questions. Why there? It wasn't on her usual route home. Inside the car, investigators found no signs of struggle. The doors were unlocked. The driver's seat was pushed back slightly. And her phone was gone. But one detail stood out. The ignition key was still inside. Detective Bennett stared at it for a long moment. Someone left in a hurry, she said. Or someone wanted it to look that way. Attention quickly turned to the people closest to Emily. Friends, classmates, and her ex-boyfriend, Daniel Reeves. 18 years old. Quiet. Intelligent. Known for keeping to himself. Their relationship had ended just 2 weeks earlier. According to friends, it hadn't been mutual. He didn't take it well, one student told investigators. He kept texting her, calling her. Records confirmed it. Dozens of missed calls. Messages unanswered. Detective Bennett brought Daniel in for questioning. He arrived calm. Composed. Too composed. Where were you yesterday between 2:30 and 4 p.m.? Bennett asked. Daniel didn't hesitate. I was at the library. Anyone see you there? He nodded. Yeah. A couple of people. He even provided names. Witnesses who later confirmed seeing him sitting alone at a corner table, headphones on, laptop open. His alibi was solid. Too solid. Still, something about Daniel didn't sit right with Bennett. It wasn't what he said. It was how easily he said it. The investigation slowed over the next few days. No new leads. No confirmed sightings. Then, on the 4th day, everything changed. A jogger discovered something in a wooded park just outside town. Police arrived within minutes. The area was cordoned off immediately. And Detective Bennett knew, before she even stepped out of her car, that this was it. Emily Carter had been found. Hidden beneath a layer of leaves and dirt, her body had been carefully concealed. Not randomly. Not hastily. But deliberately. As if someone had taken their time. The crime scene told a chilling story. There were no obvious signs of a struggle nearby. No scattered belongings. No drag marks leading into the woods. Which meant one thing. She hadn't been attacked there. She had been brought there. Please, thief. Whoever did this, Bennett said quietly, thought it through. The autopsy report came back 2 days later. And with it, the first crack in what would soon be revealed as a carefully constructed lie. Time of death, between 3:15 p.m. and 3:45 p.m. Detective Bennett stared at the report in silence. Because that time frame created an impossible problem. At that exact time, Daniel Reeves had been sitting in the library, in full view of witnesses, with a confirmed alibi. He couldn't have done it. And yet, everything pointed to him. The motive. The behavior, the obsession after the breakup, it all lined up. Except for one thing. The timeline. Bennett leaned back slowly, her eyes narrowing as the pieces refused to fit together. Either we're looking at the wrong person, she paused, or someone just pulled off a perfect crime. But 3 days later, forensic analysts made a discovery inside Emily's car that changed everything. Because wedged deep between the passenger seat and the center console, they found something almost invisible. A single fiber, dark red. Not from Emily, not from the car, but from something else entirely. And when the lab finally identified where that fiber came from, Detective Bennett realized the timeline hadn't been broken. It had been manipulated, because the fiber matched an item that Daniel Reeves had been seen wearing at a time he claimed he never left the library. The fiber changed everything. Up until that moment, Daniel Reeves had something no suspect should ever have in a case like this: a nearly perfect alibi. Witnesses placed him inside the library during the exact window Emily Carter was believed to have died. But now, a single strand of dark red fabric was telling a different story. Detective Laura Bennett stood inside the forensic lab as the analyst placed the sample under magnification. "It's synthetic," the analyst said. "High-quality blend. Not common in everyday clothing." Bennett crossed her arms. "Where does it come from?" The analyst clicked through a database comparison. Matching textile, limited production. The pause. Custom varsity jacket. Brookside High. Bennett's eyes narrowed. There were only a handful of those jackets on campus. They weren't sold in stores. They were issued to specific students. Athletes. Top performers. People who stood out. Daniel Reeves was one of them. When detectives pulled footage from the school parking lot, they found Daniel wearing the jacket that same morning. Dark red. Distinctive. Impossible to miss. But during his interview, Daniel had said something very specific. "I didn't leave the library." And when investigators checked surveillance inside the building, they found him exactly where he claimed to be. Sitting at the same table. Headphones on. Barely moving. From 2:20 p.m. to 4:10 p.m. On the surface, it looked airtight. But Detective Bennett had been doing this long enough to recognize when something felt too clean. Too perfect. "Run it again," she told the technician. The footage played on loop. Daniel sat still, barely shifting in his chair, hardly looking up. "Zoom in," Bennett said. The image pixelated slightly as the camera focused tighter on Daniel's face. Something felt off. Not wrong. Just unnatural. People moved. They stretched, adjusted, reacted. But Daniel looked almost frozen. "Go frame by frame," Bennett said. The technician slowed the footage. 1 frame. 2 frames. 3. Bennett leaned closer. "There?" she said suddenly. The technician paused. Daniel's head was tilted slightly forward, his face partially obscured by the angle. "Back 1 frame," Bennett said. The technician complied. Then forward again. And that's when they saw it. A flicker. A subtle shift in lighting across Daniel's face that didn't match the rest of the scene. Bennett's pulse quickened. "That's not Liv," she whispered. The entire room went silent. "What do you mean?" the technician asked. Bennett pointed at the screen. "Look at the background. People are moving naturally. But him," she paused, "he's not reacting to anything around him." The technician frowned. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying that might not be Daniel sitting there." The investigation pivoted instantly. Detectives pulled every angle of library footage they could find. Multiple cameras. Different perspectives. And the deeper they looked, the clearer the deception became. From a distance, it looked like Daniel. Same build. Same jacket. Same posture. But the face was never fully visible. Always slightly turned. Always partially hidden. Someone was sitting there pretending to be him, Bennett said. "But why?" another officer asked. Bennett didn't answer immediately. Because the answer was already forming in her mind. Because he needed to be somewhere else. Phone records confirmed it. At 2:48 p.m., just minutes after Emily left school, Daniel's phone pinged off a tower near the grocery store parking lot. The same location where Emily's car had been found. But there was a problem. Daniel's phone never left the library. At least, not physically. The device remained connected to the library's Wi-Fi network the entire time. which meant one thing. He hadn't taken his phone with him. He had left it behind. Pre-planned, Bennett said. Carefully executed. Daniel had created the illusion of presence. A phone left behind to establish location. A lookalike sitting in his place. And enough witnesses to confirm the story. It wasn't just an alibi. It was a performance. The question was, who had helped him? Because Daniel couldn't have done this alone. Detectives began re-interviewing students who had been in the library that afternoon. Most remembered seeing Daniel. But when shown enhanced still images, doubt began to creep in. I assumed it was him, one student admitted. I didn't get a close look. Another hesitated before saying, now that you mention it, he didn't talk to anyone. Not even once. That was unusual. Daniel was quiet, but not invisible. Then came the break. A part-time library assistant named Claire Donovan. 19. Soft-spoken. Often overlooked. At first, she insisted she hadn't noticed anything unusual. But when detectives pressed her, her story began to crack. I just thought he was studying, she said nervously. Did you speak to him? Bennett asked. Claire shook her head. No. Did you see his face clearly? Another pause. No. Bennett leaned forward slightly. Claire, is there something you're not telling us? Tears welled in her eyes. Because she knew. And she had known from the beginning. I didn't think it would go this far, she whispered. The room went still. What wouldn't go this far? Bennett asked quietly. Claire's voice broke. He said it was just to help him cover for something small. Bennett's stomach tightened. Who said that? Claire looked up. And in that moment, everything changed. Daniel. The truth was unraveling faster now. Claire admitted she had helped Daniel that day. She had asked someone to sit in his place. A friend. A student who resembled him just enough from a distance. In exchange, Daniel had promised her money. And something else. Silence. I didn't know about Emily, Claire said, shaking. I swear. I didn't know. Detective Bennett believed her. Because the fear in her eyes wasn't fake. It was realization. The kind that comes too late. But just as the case seemed to be closing in on Daniel Reeves, another discovery forced investigators to question everything all over again. Because when forensic teams returned to the wooded area where Emily had been found, they uncovered something buried deeper beneath the surface. Something that hadn't been visible during the first search. A second set of evidence. Hidden carefully. Deliberately. And when they uncovered it, Detective Bennett realized this wasn't just a planned crime. It was something far more disturbing. Because whoever had buried Emily had come back. Afterward. Criminals who believe they've committed the perfect crime always make the same mistake. They go back. Not always physically. But in some way, they return to the scene. And that's where everything begins to fall apart. The second discovery in the woods wasn't obvious at first. It wasn't something that stood out like a weapon or a personal belonging. It was smaller. Subtle. Almost invisible beneath the disturbed soil. A patch of ground that didn't match the rest. Forensic teams carefully dug through the area again, this time slower, more precise. And then they found it. A buried plastic container. Deliberately hidden. Detective Laura Bennett stood over it as it was opened. Inside were items that didn't belong to Emily. Gloves. A disposable face covering. And something else. Something that made Bennett's expression change instantly. A wristwatch. Fresh, but recognizable. It had been reported missing 2 days earlier. By Daniel Reeves. The room went silent when the connection was made. Why would he report it stolen, one officer muttered, if he buried it himself? Bennett didn't respond immediately. Because the answer wasn't simple. It never was. He wanted it on record, she said finally. Distance himself from it before anyone could connect it back to him. A preemptive move. Calculated. Cold. But not perfect. The watch was sent for analysis. So were the gloves. And this time, modern forensics did what older investigations couldn't. Trace evidence. Microscopic fibers. Skin cells invisible to the naked eye. Within 48 hours, the results came back. Partial but usable. And it matched Daniel Reeves. The first undeniable physical link placing him directly at the burial site. Not just involved. Present. Detectives moved quickly. Daniel was brought in again. This time, there was no casual tone. No open-ended questions. Just facts. Cold. Precise. Unavoidable. We know about the second burial, Bennett said, placing photos on the table. Daniel glanced at them. Just for a second. But it was enough. That flicker. That moment of recognition. It told Bennett everything she needed to know. You went back, she continued. You thought you missed something. Daniel leaned back slowly. For the first time since the investigation began. He looked unsettled. You can't prove that, he said. Bennett slid another document across the table. DNA results. Phone records. Timeline analysis. All of it points to you, she said quietly. Still, Daniel didn't break. Because he believed one thing. As long as he didn't talk, there was still a chance. The breakthrough didn't come from him. It came from someone else. The person he trusted most to keep quiet. Claire Donovan. The weight of what she had done had been building for days. Sleepless nights. Endless questions. And one terrifying realization. Daniel hadn't just lied to her. He had used her. And now, she was part of it. Accessory. Witness. Or worse. Claire walked into the station voluntarily. No lawyer. No hesitation. Just fear. I need to tell you everything, she said. Detective Bennett listened. And what Claire revealed filled in the final, missing pieces of the puzzle. Daniel had planned it days in advance. He knew Emily's routine. Knew where she parked. Knew the exact time she would leave school. The confrontation wasn't spontaneous. It was staged. He had intercepted her near the parking lot. Gotten into her car under the pretense of talking. One last conversation. One last chance. That's what he told her. But it wasn't. Claire didn't witness what happened next. But she knew enough. Daniel had returned to her later that day. Collected. Asking her to help create the alibi. That was when she arranged for someone to sit in the library. That was when the illusion was built. And that was when Daniel believed he had done it. The perfect crime. But perfection doesn't survive pressure. And it doesn't survive time. Because what Daniel didn't account for was the smallest detail. The kind no one notices until it's too late. The fiber. The watch. The second burial. Each one a mistake. Each one a crack. Until the entire story collapsed. Daniel Reeves was arrested 3 days later. And eventually convicted. The evidence was overwhelming. The timeline reconstructed down to the minute. The alibi dismantled piece by piece. And the truth laid bare in front of everyone. But the story didn't end there. Because even after the verdict, even after the sentencing, one detail continued to haunt Detective Bennett. During the trial, prosecutors presented the timeline as complete. Every movement, every decision, every action accounted for. It was clean, logical, convincing. Too convincing. Bennett sat alone one night, reviewing the case file again. Not because she doubted the outcome, but because something still didn't feel right. Something small. Something unfinished. Then she saw it. A gap. Just 3 minutes. Between 3:12 p.m. and 3:15 p.m. Unaccounted for. Unexplained. A window where no data existed. No witnesses. No records. Nothing. 3 minutes. It wasn't enough to change the verdict. But it was enough to raise a question. What really happened in those final moments? 'Cause sometimes, the truth we prove isn't the whole truth. And as Bennett closed the file for the last time, one thought lingered in her mind. A quiet, unsettling possibility. What if Daniel Reeves hadn't acted alone? If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it.